Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
So Logan, we're over halfway through the calendar year, unbelievably. We've crossed that threshold, so Christmas will be coming up very shortly. It will literally arrive and you'll be like, well, have I saved up enough for that? And usually the answer is no. But I uncharacteristically sent you a message yesterday and said, look, thinking of doing just a sort of a mid-year check-in on the industry. How has 2023 fared so far? And I got a lukewarm response from you. I mean, very rarely do I even bother to give you a heads up of what's happening. And then the time I do, thinking, oh, you might want to have a little think about that, it was queried. So it's almost as like you're not up for this. And in the opening minute, let's just get into that and let the audience know that Logan doesn't care for this little topic.
I said don't care. I think it just on reflection, I was like, I mean, firstly, mid-year, I was like, where's that gone?
Yeah, that is a shocker.
That was my initial instinct. Was good lord, we're at that point. And I looked at the day and I was like, well, yeah, we are, which is just bizarre. But with these sort of things, I often just sort of like whatever's done's done. But I'm really poor at like looking back on like what I've played and gone, is that good or not? And have I played things that actually were released this year?
That is a good point, because we're very much a area of play what you want when you want. Don't be concerning yourself with new releases, because that's for the people that get paid to do this. That's their job. It's ain't a fucking job at the end of the day. It's a hobby, which has an extension of a hobby. So play what you want when you want, and there's still interesting conversations to be gleaned, I find, out of that. That's the philosophy.
Agreed. Yeah. No, and you're right, but that's why I always find it difficult when it's like, how's this year gone? Like, my initial reaction all the time is to say shit, because it largely has been. But then I look back on it and I think, well, not for everyone, it's not. And I think I've probably played more stuff than I probably realised, but and I have, like, I've played Hogwarts, I've played God of War, like I've played some pretty like good AAA games. So you just, as I say, I've got a really bad habit of kind of just going, shit, nothing's happened, and I go, well, actually, I've played some good games. So that's why I was like,
Yeah, I haven't done the data check yet, but I think in terms of my personal set of games that I've played, I'm probably going to hit an all-time low of like release of just finishing games this year, and that's large part due to the Persona 4 and 5 sort of back-to-back double bill that I gave, which took up seemingly almost half the year. Actually, I mean, the way I look at it is it's at least 4 months. And then it fended off other new releases for the most part. So I'm already behind the 8 ball, or behind the snookered, as we'd say over this. Yeah, behind the 8 ball, I don't like that. That's a pool reference for Americans, isn't it? What you'd say here is you're snookered, which people don't understand what snooker is over the pond, but I do. Yeah. And that's the sort of...
I don't know what the other term you could use would be. I'm not trying to think of an alternate, more universal...
Because behind the 8 ball works, but if the final ball is the 8 ball, which is the black ball, you're in profiting, aren't you? If you're stuck behind that, you got a free hit at it. Whereas snookered is genuinely a term where you can't see the object ball. You are stuck. There's at least one ball blocking your path to the ball you need to hit. So
I prefer snookered.
Well, of course, most of the stuff like this, where it gets sort of translated on its way over the Atlantic, comes out as absolute gibberish, like the nonsense they come out with.
Yeah. So just to clarify, we've about 30% of our podcast is US listeners. Is that right?
Almost half. Yeah.
It's annoying. So we can't even just go.
Well,
in the minority, we have to consider them in the...
I think they understand that they're generally wrong most of the time. I think that's what we've got to. I don't know, we'll find out in the comments, won't we? We
will, yeah, you're right.
We'll definitely find out if there's any film corrections, because Logan got told off for his story last week about The Dark Knight. You know what? You told the story about The Dark Knight and the hospital exploding and all that sort of stuff. At the time, I thought, I don't know if that's true. It sounds far-fetched, but
Yeah.
I've no reason to bother challenging it because otherwise the podcast never ends. I'm sure there's things I say and you're like, he's talking shit here, but for the interest of time, there's no point in us sitting here going back and forth all afternoon. But there was a correction coming in from Rumble saying that that's not what happened. He sent a little voice note. So, I mean, where's the genesis of that story coming from? Did Adkins tell you? Because he's the arbiter of fake news.
I just saw it through the film.
Through Fred by Meta, the brand new social media platform that you should all join. That's not an advert, huh?
It might have been some sort of movie program or something, but I did see, and my only challenge to that would be, which is what I said to you, is Ledger ain't here to dispute it anymore, is he?
He's no covering his backside. He
comes out, doesn't he, and goes, "Whoa, yeah, it was all planned." You go, "Well, was it?" He ain't going to come out and go, "We nearly blew up Heath Ledger," or do you know what I mean? He's going to go, "Oh, he ain't going to suck that up." I mean, look, it could be one or the other. It looks. The problem is, Ledger was such a good actor that it's hard to tell whether it was scripted or not. I mean, the only thing that we can say is why would what's his name lie? Yeah. Why's my mind gone blank?
Friday,
Director jobby. Yeah, it is. Yeah. But I need to get this coffee down me. But yeah, I mean, fine. I mean, I think it would have been better as improv. I think that gives more credence to Ledger rather than to that director fuck.
I'm just surprised they even did anything practical. Like, because nowadays most things like that are CGI'd in.
I ain't buying the fact that they needed to give him time to walk away, by the way. Like,
he's been told to say that by HR and health and safety. Someone went, don't tell him that wasn't factored in. Just make it sound like we did it. There's no way they went, "Oh, just press the button later." Like, you don't need to press the button and delay the explosion so he can walk away. And arguably, he doesn't walk away. He turns around and looks at it anyway. Yeah. And then it blows up and he walks into the bus. So, I don't know. What can you say? We've been fact-checked. I dispute the fact-checker, but Nolan can't be trusted is what I'd say. None of them can. No one in this earth can be trusted, I found these days. They're talking, unless they're under oath, and even then, it's like, well, you're probably lying. You're open, you don't get found out. So that's how it works. Anyway, this is Idle Game Chat, a grassroots and independent podcast produced by Dimp Digital, which is our company name of sorts. I don't know, but this is the flagship.
Is it registered?
No, it's not. It probably should be in some ways. I don't know.
Tax breaks, isn't it?
I don't know if you've earned 3p, whether you have to pay tax on that. I mean, Rishi will have it, I'm sure. He'll have 40% of that if he thinks he can have it, if he can get it. So maybe
he will. You're right. Yeah,
he'll absolutely take that. So maybe that's something to look at. But this is our flagship show, mostly dropping weekly, talking about some games that you can play today and the industry at large in terms of video games. Sometimes it's hardware, but usually a video game and software. Got Logan, who's my co-host here, resident referee, current FGL Grand Prix champion, looking to do what everyone has done since. Win the Grand Prix and then win the championship the very next year. No one has defended that title.
Oh, what's that is?
It's strange in some ways, but... I mean, Hall disputed and say he's defended it, but Hall never earned his way into the... He was placed there. And the people that were given his opponents in the early years were also hand-picked. No one had earned their way through. The year that it got earned, he lost. So...
So how did we used to do it then? Did it used to be a case of, right...
I think we just did. So we just did the championship, which meant that there was a captain, two captains, they just picked you guys, and then there was no sort of Grand Prix... Because we always thought we were never going to get 60 games, but then I thought, hang on, let's start adding this and forcing people down that route. And then from there on, as soon as people earned their way in, it became a difficult proposition for them. So
interesting. Good stat, that. I like that.
Yeah, that's the stat. Let's go. And it could happen again. I mean, you're in good position. Obviously, we catch up on that fairly regularly when there's a new game released to get to that. Anyway... We've got a good episode lined up, I think, because we've actually got later on, I very rarely do this, but again, I say I rarely do this as though I'm going to spoil something. The title of this episode will be the game we're talking about. And I actually there's no way anyone listening or watching could know when it's written.
You get snarled up in it, didn't you? Because when you're doing it, it's like, because it's live, you think, no one knows.
Yeah, they do.
But they do. You've already done the work, you've edited it, you've already chumped it all together and chucked it out in the title.
Yeah, it's there, and it's called The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, gone for the big dog.
Who do you reckon's done the review of that?
Oh,
You don't know. It's the thing. You actually don't know.
I mean, it could be. I think it might be someone left field, and I say left field. Salmon.
No, not salmon.
All right.
No.
So Pac-Man wouldn't have been available. Adkins.
I don't know what's happened to Adkins. He's gone off. I'm seeing him this weekend. I have to get into him. And...
Well, it must be Hall then.
No, it's Pac-Man.
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't think he would have done it that quickly.
Well, it's been 2 months.
I know.
But yeah, it's a big game, so for him to commit and finish it was a surprise. But
yeah. Oh, interesting.
He seemingly got over the line first. Unless Adkins has done it and just not told me, but
jumped off that hype train, hasn't he?
He's fell off it. He's fallen off it and it's damaged him in some way. So hopefully he gets his act together. But as I always say,
it's a good point actually. He has been AWOL more so these days than he has been for some time. Concerning.
Drugs and drink. Keep saying it.
It'll catch up with you when you get to his age.
Absolutely, he's 1 year older than us. It's really gonna. That's where it really hits you when you get to the next year. Anyway, so we're here to give a little bit of a mid-year check-in of the gaming industry as it's been for 2023. We're not going to go super deep, and I've had to obviously hand-pick some of this stuff, so there's going to be inherent bias. I can't talk about every game that's ever released because there's been hundreds, but we're going to talk about the 3 main platform holders mostly because I find that the most interesting, given that they are the lifeblood of the console space. And then we will do a bit of best of the rest of like third-party stuff. You know, Logan mentioned the likes of a Hogwarts maybe appearing, and you know that could come up later on. But let's get going. First of all, I want to ask you a few questions, and this is not a formal quiz. It's more of a way just to get up and just sort of set the table. So we're talking about Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation. So those are the 3 big ones to start with. Who do you think has shipped the most games out of those 3? And when I say games, this includes things like a port to PC, it could include, and it could also include a port to a new platform that it wasn't on before. So just factor those potential variants in, because a lot of that gets counted in. So who do you think out of the 3? You can put them in order if you want. You know, you can say, I think it's going to be X, Y, and then Z.
So would you count Game Pass editions?
So this is only games that are published by the platform holders. And so in Xbox's case, it includes Bethesda because... And it includes Bungie for Sony, because they actually still, technically, if you look at the publishing arm, Bethesda Games do the publishing, whereas something like, I'm trying to think now of a game, something like Halo is an Xbox Game Studio game. But something like Hi-Fi Rush is Bethesda. But it's all under the Xbox umbrella, and the same with
understand.
Bungie. So, but it doesn't include like third-party drops. It's only stuff that they've made themselves under that umbrella, and then drops either on Game Pass or at retail.
Sorry. So it's literally got to be first-party stuff. Sorry, you probably did say that, and my brain
It could be second-party stuff as well, where they've published it, but they don't own the studio. But again, Sony or Xbox or Nintendo have to have their name stamped on that publishing arm.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like Nintendo would be number 1 for me, but I don't know I don't know if that's true. That's just because I was thinking of all the stuff that they are going to release. I'd probably say Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation. I don't know why, but it feels like PlayStation have released fuck all, but that's probably because I ain't paying attention.
Mate, those PC ports. They could, but you were correct.
Was I?
Yeah. So you got Nintendo have released 7 games.
Credibility restored.
Absolutely, got away with it. Nintendo with 7 games, which actually all are 7 games. Xbox.
Is that it?
Well, yeah.
That's mad. You know, the top one hasn't even released double figures this year yet. I don't know if that's a lot or not. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we'll get down to it. You'll realise how little this lot do. Other than Nintendo, Xbox with 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Only 3 of those count as new games, and how I categorise new games are stuff that's scored an Open Critic.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's like a console port of Age of Empires 2 in there. There's Ghostwire Tokyo, which was on PlayStation 5 last year, is now on Xbox.
Yeah.
That's these sort of things that make up those numbers. But there's only 3 new titles there. PlayStation have got 5, but they've got the same amount of new games free. And again, they've got 3 others which are PC ports.
That's not a lot, is it?
No, it's not a lot. And I think this is... I don't know if there's a misconception that these... I mean, Nintendo, to be honest, that's more than 1 a month. That feels...
Yeah.
And they're all legit new games. There's a remaster in there, but it's like from 20 years ago, so it's clearly work that's been put into it. It's not like a port.
Yeah.
I think that's enough. And I've always said though, if you get one big game a year from each of these, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like, do we need 5 other bits of took to go along with it? I would argue not, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, it has to be taken into consideration that like third-party games and whatnot do bump all of that out.
Oh yeah, there's so much to play.
Like there's, I mean,
if this was it, we'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah. So it does have to be taken into consideration with that, but it's still just, I don't know. Is it? I'm struggling now in my head to decide whether it's okay or not, because I think we've said before 1 or 2, like absolute bangers a year, and we're happy.
Yeah,
like 1 is really the minimum, but acceptable.
Yeah.
Like 2, 3 would be lovely. Yeah. But when you look at that and go, well, they're probably releasing about 10 a year, like games, 10 like tops. I mean, it's not a great hit rate, is it?
No, but then I think when we spoke about it last week, when we look at the budget for Horizon Forbidden West and The Last of Us and how long it took, they're taking half a decade. Like these bigger titles. And how long's Starfield been in development for?
Fucking God knows.
Fuck knows. Probably 6 years at this. Probably longer even. So that's the price you pay. I mean, unless 5 years ago you planned for 2023 to be the year, you're always it's always that cycle, isn't it? It's that cadence and.
I wonder how they do actually like plan all this shit out. Like,
must be
so
a fucking
far
nightmare, mustn't it? Because it's all guesswork. To do,
like, agile development, like in sprints and doing all that sort of bollocks, and trying to also plan your release dates 5-6 years in advance and making sure. Like,
it'd be really interesting to be a fly on the wall where you go into one of these firms and it's like one of the big developers and they say, look, we want to make a AAA £70 UK game, and they're like, here's the pitch for it, and they have to convince them that in 5-6 years this will be worth it. That's such a big leap of faith, because the amount of things that can go wrong in that time or cannot stick, or when it comes out it's total toot, as we've seen with the likes of Redfall. Like, you're taking a massive risk on time, resource and everything. Reputation.
It's a good point. And obviously we discussed last week around films versus games. At least with a film you can go, here's the script, draft 1. Like, and there's actually, or you can storyboard some of it. So that's what they often do, don't they? They storyboard it, script it, and kind of almost do some sort of like
those with the knowledge can see that a good and a bad script and what's worth going to the next phase. There's people rocking up here with fucking slideshows and perhaps a prototype that they shouldn't have been working on. And it's like, well, this is the idea of the game, but in order for this to come together, it's going to take 5 years, and all these systems need to mesh and come together.
Yeah. No, it's I wonder how they go. They do go. Yeah. I mean, you look at Redfall. If we use that as an example, like that's got signed off, and in principle, you think
with Redfall, it sounds like, and again, this is all based on people speaking to people off the record, etc., that Bethesda, the publisher, wanted Arcane, the developer, to do a game like this, and Arcane, not specialised in that area, were like, we don't really want to do this, but they was like, look, your last 2 games, whilst critically have been good, sales-wise haven't been up to snuff. Let's find something more mainstream, hence a shooter, hence a co-op, all that sort of stuff, and go for that. And they ended up losing 70% of their staff, because the people that were in that Arcane studio were like, we don't want to work on a first-person co-op shooter, like with loot and whatnot. We want to make these immersive sims that we've been doing. So they had a lot of churn and whatnot. And it looks like an example of where a publisher, the Allens of society, have gone, well, the numbers say that these are the games we need to be making, And although you guys have not made one, go off and do that, because what you've been doing before, whilst the fucking losers that play video games like enthusiasts, they like it. It ain't sticking with the mainstream. So go off and do that. So it's almost pushed down upon, and that probably happens as well. Like and then you're trying to put square pegs in round holes.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting that I don't know. You think like, imagine if you went, I like doing this. They went, what's that got to do with anything? Like, it's an interesting thought. But
it's art. But it's not. It is art, but it's also a business, and that's where the crossover is happening. This isn't a pure art form. It has to be a product.
Yeah,
it has to be seen as.
I wonder how many films that fucking Nolan's had thrust on him, and he went, I don't want to make that. And you're making it.
Maybe early on, but I think honestly, since he broke out, he does what it's up to him, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
I suppose that's the point in Arcane.
Same with Rockstar. You ain't going to tell them you're going to be doing something else. If they wanted to do something of a spin-off, they could, I am sure, could go to Take-Two and say, I know you want us to do GTA 6, but we actually got an idea for this little spin-off. And they go, all right, just to keep them happy. Yeah, like, there is that definitely happens.
Interesting.
But yeah, so we've got 7, 6, and 5 from the big 3 platform holders. So I said 7 of Nintendo's games are new and got a new Open Critic page. Got an average score of 81. So it's not bad. That's pretty good. The games in question are Fire Emblem Engage, Metroid Prime Remastered, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, Bayonetta Origins, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and just recently, Everybody 1-2 Switch. That's sitting on a 58. So how they've let that get out the door, and we talk about the quality control at Nintendo, but that's a real shithouse. But other than that, every other game in that list has scored at least an 80, and there's 2 games in the 90s, Metroid Prime Remastered 94 and Tears of the Kingdom 96.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll let you decide what your opinion is, but that's a pretty strong lineup. 7.
Yeah, it is.
6 well-received games, 1 shitter, 2 absolute darlings. If you're into that ecosystem and you're into these games, you are cackling all the way to the bank. Well, you're not cackling to the bank because you've got to pay for them, but you're fulfilled entertainment-wise, I guess.
I know what you mean. You get your money's worth. It's not like you can complain that they're not churning it out because they are. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. That's why I went for Nintendo. I mean, arguably, if you've got a Zelda that's come out plus some other stuff. You're satisfied almost for the year.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what they do for the rest of it, and then they announce some Mario stuff. So you got a bump a year if you're if you love a bit of Nintendo.
Yeah, that's what they're looking for. Xbox, on the other hand, so here's we've got 6 games, 3 that are new.
God.
So Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, which was ported to console. Then we've got Hi-Fi Rush 89 on Open Critic. Minecraft Legends a 70. Ghostwire Tokyo ported to Xbox, Redfall 57, and then Mighty Doom, which was a mobile game. So there's a bit of cheating there to get to 6, but that's what it is. That's what came out under that umbrella. Average of 72. Not a stellar year, is it? I mean, even if you,
I would say that Hi-Fi Rush has probably got probably a 10-point bump in my view.
Shadow dropped, didn't it? But for the sake of the numbers being what they are, even with that, 72 is not really up to snuff out of those 3, is it? And Redfall has heavily dragged that down. But even Minecraft Legends, I mean, that's bang average.
Fucking about with that franchise and releasing.
They're not going to, are they? $2 billion paid for that. It's fucking milk that.
Stressing me out though. It's so shit. Like, it's just, what are we doing? It is so, isn't it? Like, Minecraft as itself was good. Everything they've done as a spin-off has been crap because
Minecraft story mode.
It was crap.
The pig.
Was it? Yeah. I mean, I forgot that, Ruben. Fucking hell. But do you know what I mean, though? When it's been reduced to that, though, apps in itself, that's the highlight. Really? I mean, and the low light. But you know what I mean? Like, it's, what are we doing? Leave it alone. Move on.
Might as well have a go, though. Have a go. Minecraft Dungeons and Minecraft
Have a go,
Legends.
as long as you're releasing some other stuff, I think is the point. Like, they're hanging their hat on it as well, which is not what you want. But anyway, friend of the show.
That's Xbox's half year. PlayStation, so they did 5 and then 3 sort of new games. So we had Returnal going to PC, which fine, good. Last of Us Part 1 going to PC, an utter disaster. Absolute stinker from them for releasing that. They really dropped a ball. That's real poor. Then we get into sort of the new stuff, quote unquote. So we had Horizon Call of the Mountain, which was the PlayStation VR 2. So one thing to keep note here is that PlayStation dropped a brand new bit of kit in PSVR 2. That scored itself an 80. Destiny 2 Lightfall, a 71. And MLB The Show 23 and 81, which is actually available on all platforms. So if you're looking for exclusive pissing contests, in fact, Destiny 2 Lightfall's on all. So actually, if you want the exclusive pissing contest, then Jim's blown that, but I don't really subscribe to that too much these days.
Yeah.
What do you make of that then? So a couple of PC ports, which are fine. We know they're going to be doing that throughout the years, and we've got Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart being announced for later on this year also. Yeah. They did drop that PSVR 2. I mean, something that none of us gave an interest in because of the price, but still had to put money and time into that. So feels like that's been the focus really of the first quarter, and if not the first half of the year. And then you've got the regulars of MLB The Show always coming out every year. That's the sports franchise. And then Destiny 2 seemingly always has an expansion to deal with. So we're talking about Xbox not being stellar there, but that's not a particularly enthralling lineup. Did get an average of 77 though, so just pips them on the Open Critic average race. But still, again,
I mean, there's nothing there that gets your heart pumping, though, is there? Like, there's nothing exciting there.
You are VR mad and you've been waiting for PSVR 2, because that must have been super exciting for some people that wanted to jump down into that. Because again, the kit seemingly very, very good, priced. Probably appropriately for the kit, but too expensive for most people, which is why it doesn't get a lot of chat. But objectively, they have had to launch and market and do that, and it seems like if you're into that space, you're laughing to a certain point. You've got a lovely bit of kit there. Now, if they abandon it in 6 months and we don't get any new games for it, that won't be a good look. But for now, they've got something to be getting on with.
Yeah, still.
But it waters down the hardcore console experience, undoubtedly.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I don't really like the idea of giving them, I wouldn't say a free pass, but like, it's still not good, is it?
It's worth factoring in, but yeah, I agree. It's not good at all. It's as simple as that. It ain't. Yes, you have to do PlayStation VR 2, which probably 5% of your fan base are going to be interested in. So even from the numbers perspective, if you can remove that and be quite
sobering, isn't it, when you have it laid down in front of you? It's I don't know what else to say. It's disappointing.
It is.
What else can you say other than just go, shit?
Yes, yeah. Because if you don't like MLB The Show, so if you don't like baseball, you're out. If you don't like Destiny, you're out. And if you don't like Call of the Mountain, if you don't like VR, you're out. Every single one of those has a caveat of you being interested
There's something that, that's what I was doing when I was listening to it. I was
There's no general
MLB
sort of...
The Show, like, that's largely going to be a US-centric game.
Yeah. You got 550 UK pounds buy-in for Call of the Mountain, and then you got Destiny 2, which if you haven't been a part of for the last decade, you're unlikely to go after that. At least you could say Hi-Fi Rush, anyone could download that and give it a go, and it's more of a general game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I'm sort of sitting here going, well, they've released some stuff. All right, they've got a headset, VR headset has come out, but at least even the Minecraft stuff on the Xbox is shit. But as you say, like, it feels like anyone can pick up that stuff. It's more broadly going to be of interest to people, I think, is where I think of it. But
some will say that it's objectively better just because of the scores, but we'll see. Now I'm going to ask you a difficult question.
Yeah, love a difficult question.
I want you to grade these three fucks based on the data.
Grade?
Imagine you're a lecturer at university and they're like, look, I don't think they use A's and B's and C's at university.
They did when I was there.
Can you get an F? Is that because that feels again like an Americanism? I've only ever seen E's handed out in my academic experience.
I mean, I have to
F
be honest,
must be 0%.
I feel like I'd
fail.
I feel like I didn't ever get one. I'm pretty sure that you can basically just go from
If you don't show up to the exam, you get an F.
You're ungraded. It's just a U. You're just ungraded. It's that bad.
Yeah.
I think that's basically as bad as it
that
gets.
was a U. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So it's just so shit, or you just like wrote some expletive on the paper or something. I don't know. You just went, nah. Ain't even dealing with that. Ungraded. It's so poor.
But I'd seen an E popped about plenty of times, and D's obviously C's and A's and whatnot. But
I don't know if there should be like a grading criteria that the markers and the graders get, but I don't know if there's an element
they're on
of
bloody
personal...
strike at the moment, aren't they? So can't even ask them.
Well, symptom of the times, isn't it? So you're going to ask me to grade these fucks?
Yeah, in an objective manner. I don't want this Logan bias creeping in. Look at the data that's been given to you. The averages.
So what are we going to go A to E and a U? Yeah, is that what we're doing?
Well, if you need the U, then something disastrous has gone wrong. But yeah.
I'm just saying. I'm just establishing the criteria.
We're not doing an F. That feels like something I've never seen in my life.
Yeah, fine. Okay. Well, look, easy-ish. I think I would say Nintendo would be a B. Mm-hmm. I think they've had a solid
just released
start.
one of the greatest games of all time.
I ain't played it, and I know the Nintendo fanboys will go, listen, the Zelda's out. Mario coming and etc. It ain't here yet. So I think for the first half of the year, I think you could probably say that's a B. Probably a B plus, to be fair. You could probably give them if we're doing pluses.
Can you get an A, or is that got to wait until the year's ended?
Well,
is that how you're are you saving room for a?
I mean, there's one way of doing this is going ignore what's coming next, just on what you got at the minute, which is arguably the way to do it. But I still think B plus is an acceptable position for them. I think good, solid releases. If they'd have released a Mario as well, like then in the first half of the year, then you're absolutely laughing all the way to the bank. I think that's absolute quids in.
Arguably, that's overkill, but.
Yeah, I mean it would be, but that's if you want to get the top marks, then that's where you have to be. In my view,
go the extra mile.
Yeah. So I'd say B plus for the first half of the year for Nintendo. Now this is where it gets tricky because it's a case of how low do you go.
Well.
I mean, I think it's difficult in some ways to distinguish between PlayStation and Xbox, but I think it's right to acknowledge on PlayStation that they've released a bit of new tech. I think you have to take that into consideration. It's not just a piece of, not like a webcam, like it's a significant... Like,
they've got a webcam, it's awful.
They have, yeah.
It's not even a webcam because you can't plug it into your PC. They've locked it down. So you can't even multi-use it, you fucking morons. It's crap anyway. You wouldn't ever want to use it for anything. Even at this fucking low level, you wouldn't want to use it.
No. I mean... But my point is, like, it's a significant piece of gaming tech, right? So I think with that in mind, they get a C minus.
Gotten away with it. If I went home with that, I'd say you've got away with that.
It is a getting away with it, and that's on the basis of the tech. Like, if not, then you're scrabbling around.
Yeah.
And then Xbox, I mean, it's a D, right? I think.
I'll let you go. No, go.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's a D, right? Because you haven't released an awful lot. You know, they shadow dropped Hi-Fi Rush, which I think has got a bump because of the shadow drop piece and the hype around that. I think it was a solid game, but from my perspective, it wasn't as good as I think the critics have marked it or graded it as. And I just think the whole Redfall debacle just really drags them down. Like, I really do. I think that in itself is such a disappointment that it probably pulls them from a C or a C minus down to a D for me.
I was going to ask about that because that's kind of where I was thinking and wonder if that will be factored in. That actually, even if you release one great game, releasing just such an abomination is enough to pull the grading down. I think that's completely fair because you shouldn't ship to it. Yeah, you know,
especially when that's one of their key releases for the first half of the year as well, right? I mean, it's clear that they were going right. Redfall H1, Starfield H2 sort of thing. Yeah, and that was, I don't know. It just felt like such a disappointment. Like that's it wasn't even just average. I mean, it's below
it's really
par in every way. Like,
scored lower than that AEW game that I love. So that's where if you're getting lower scores than that, you're struggling. The only thing that's rivaled it that you could argue is everybody's 1-2 switch 58. I mean, even that's 1 point above it.
But the point is, they got a Zelda game out, and they've got several other
six others
which have compensated, right? One can bomb if you're doing, other stuff. But the fact is, you're looking at bloody Minecraft Legends, and like you just got
new Starfield controller come out. Tech.
Yeah, they got a watch as well in the pack, but it's just not good enough from Microsoft, right? I think that's anyone that says that what they've done the first half of the year is acceptable and giving them a C. I think you need to have your heads checked. It's just not.
I must say, I'm assuming we are ignoring the PC releases and the ports and Mighty Doom and things like that. This is purely from a new game and console and mainline PC perspective. So for those saying, well, Sony crapped on The Last of Us Part 1, it's like, but we know we always lean on Open Critic because it gives us a gauge of the newer stuff, and that's kind of what they're going to be judged on. Because The Last of Us Part 1 is a great game. It's just the port's crap. And whatnot. So just to get those out of there, and they'll start squabbling, won't they? These full facts coming out. You've done that wrong. So just to cap that off, Nintendo have a B plus, so they are the star student at the moment. PlayStation with a C minus, getting away with it, and then Xbox with a flat D. Was it?
Yeah,
flat D, and that's from the resident referee. So Phil with lots of work to do to pull fingers out of arses, and I think we have to revisit this later in the year now I've done it. Nintendo, just carry on with what you're doing and get that Mario in good shape, because that'll please the lecturer here. And then Jim, just know that you're on notice with that.
Yeah,
like,
I mean that's fair.
That's a warning. That's a warning. That C minus, isn't it? It's
a shot off the bow.
Don't come back in 6 months with similar.
Get me saying. Get moving, basically.
Get moving, absolutely. Anyway, that's the platform holders done. Best of the rest is another little question.
Okay.
Out of these 6, who do you think's released the most amount of games? Square Enix, EA, Capcom, Bandai Namco, or THQ Nordic?
Oh, this is going to be a trick.
It's no tricks.
My head wants to say EA, but I think it might be Square Enix. So I'm going to go with EA, but acknowledging that I think it's Square Enix.
Yeah, you had it even. You done a real Spurs there. Had jaws of victory. You've just snatched it.
Defeat.
Yeah. So Square Enix was the top dogs. Yeah. Bandai Namco was second with 9, and Sega was third with 8. I don't even bother ranking the rest, because once you're out the top 3, you're not worthy.
And that's it. Yeah.
In terms of the games, these are some of the highest scoring games that have been released: Resident Evil 4, Street Fighter 6, Dead Space, Final Fantasy 16, Diablo 4, Octopath Traveler 2, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and Hogwarts Legacy. Obviously, you've got most to say about Hogwarts. That's the one out of that sort of slate you played. But how do you think overall the year's been? There's a fair amount of good quality games that have come out. Again, there's over a dozen, half a dozen there. And again, you say one a month you probably want to play, perhaps, of those sort of bigger titles. And it seems like if you're into that, there's a lot lurking.
Yeah, I mean, where we've got I'd argue that you and I, and you even to a greater degree than me, have got the full menu available, right? I think we're probably fortunate that we can, within reason, pick up whatever we want and play it. You'd have to argue there's a lot there. I mean, there's less so. I mean, if you just had a PlayStation, like you're probably in a bit of bother there. And you could argue
those third parties though are all of those games are on PlayStation. Yeah. So I think this is what this is why focusing so heavily on the platform holders sometimes is a bit reductive, because actually the industry, most of the numbers and the games that are coming out are from third parties and are multi-platform. Like the exclusives are actually the exception to the rule. Generally.
They are. Yeah.
But we like to focus on them because they should be doing the best. But
Yeah,
I
I
digress.
think it's a fair point. But I think overall, I mean, you'd have to argue that if you've got a PlayStation or an Xbox, largely,
Yep.
the third-party titles and everything on there are going to have given you plenty to be getting on with.
I should say the exception to that actually is Switch.
Yeah.
Because actually, only one of those games is currently out on the Switch. So I think that's actually, it's interesting to see that Nintendo, I think they know they have to do a good job themselves of getting out, 7 games in this half, because the third party stuff just doesn't come as frequently because of the power differential.
Yeah.
We're not getting Hogwarts Legacy till later on this year, and if at all. I mean, that could be delayed again.
Should. I mean, what an awful way to play that game.
Well, that's what Paper's going to play it on, he said. And then Octopath Traveler 2 is the only one on there. The rest, they're not going to get. So it kind of makes sense that they put a bit more effort into getting a consistent slate out.
I don't know, but this is a separate conversation that can go on forever, but I wonder whether that's a deliberate, we'd rather do it ourselves, because I'm sure there'd be studios and publishers that would do it.
Yeah.
Or whether they just go, it's cheaper and within our control to do it ourselves than to essentially outsource that.
I just think they have their slate of games they make, they get 100% of the profit off that, and they're like, if the third parties want to come to Switch, we've got 120 million install base. It's up to them. We don't need. We clearly don't need. Big AAA third party support on the Switch, because if we look at the metrics, Alan in the boardroom says, I don't need that. If they want to put it on there, fine, we'll take 30% of the sales. If they want to spend time and resource doing a miracle job trying to port down bloody Resident Evil 4 to it, then have at it. But we actually don't need any of that to at the moment. So on your bike, there's really no reason for them to get involved, other than if they wanted to create this ultimate ecosystem. But
it is interesting, right? Because I think if you think about, there's never any Mario fatigue, really. There's never any there's all these games that come out. Everyone's like, "Give me more. I'll have as many as you'll give me." Yep. Imagine if PlayStation did that with Last of Us's, and
there are people already sick of Horizon and Last of Us already. They're like, I'm doing a third one. I'm like, fucking hell, you only had 2 in a decade.
This is the thing that always, I don't know why, but it's kind of like Mario in itself, as an example, like the format of it. Yeah, okay, recently they've done a 3D Mario, and you said that's what you want. Like, fine, but ultimately they're releasing a 2D Mario later this year, and I'm like, give me that. I'll have it. I want it. Like, and I don't sit here going, oh, it's just stagnant. All they do is the same stuff. Oh, what? I've got a fucking elephant. Like, do you know what I mean, though? Like, there's no like criticism of that. Everyone just laps it up, and it's an interesting dichotomy. There you go.
It's strong IP, isn't it? It's strong
intellectual.
Well, they've done a good job with it.
Yeah, but they've done a good job with The Last of Us. They've done a good job with Horizon. It's just interesting that people get fatigued of doing those, like, games on a PlayStation or using an Xbox. Like,
because there's more of a war on between those two as well. Yeah. What you get is when the noise seeps in, you get a lot of people moaning about games they don't even play. Because it's on the green platform or it's on the blue platform. Nintendo, to be honest, are sort of excluded from that because they just get on with what they're doing. They release 7 games half a year, 6 scoring excellently. They serve their customer base, and they've been doing it for 30 odd years. It's one of those things. Whereas on the other side, you're all, what's the first? Well, is it on PlayStation? Oh, they only do third person, and maybe they do only do third person action adventure games with story, and people don't like it. But a lot of the noise that seeps in is from nonsense, and maybe people are just sick of it. Who knows? But
I just think it's interesting that criticism gets levied. Like, whereas like Nintendo have been churning out Marios every couple of years or whatever for, as you say, for like 30 odd years, and everyone goes, "Yep, more please, I'll have it. Give me more, if anything, not less." It's just an interesting difference between the two, I think, in terms of attitude and approach. But it's an interesting one, I think, broadly.
Yep, agreed. Right, I'm going to call the episode there. Well, not call it. We're going to get into Tears of the Kingdom, so
Yeah.
got about 45 minutes of Pac-Man waffling about that, finally giving the lowdown. The man that's played nearly every Zelda game that's ever existed in real time, so an interesting perspective for sure. Anyway, we'll see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game impressions to close out this edition of Idle Game Chat. I'm joined by the former quiz winner, Dimp Digital Quiz that is. It's Pac-Man himself, it's Tom Adcock. How's it going?
Hello mate, I'm good, thank you.
Good. All the better for speaking to you, especially with this high-profile video game. Some are saying it's more than a video game. It's literally the best thing ever. So whether it's even classed as a video game now is going to be a question for you to answer. But it is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Undoubtedly the biggest game of this year, I would say so far. I don't think there's any disputing that, regardless of what people think of it. It's just been a zeitgeist. It's died down a bit, I must say. We are recording and publishing this pretty quickly from when we're speaking, like a few days. Some of the stuff sits in the chamber for weeks, but because it's Zelda. But I must say, it's kind of died down the last sort of 3 to 4 weeks. But the game's nearly been out 2 months, so that's obviously to be expected, maybe. But Elden Ring felt like it went on forever. People talking about it.
It's very true. Very true. Yeah, I haven't seen many of those. Like, I remember with Breath of the Wild, it was just constant from the minute it came out for about 2 years. Everyone like breaking the physics engine and doing all kinds of mad shit.
They probably are, to be honest. I haven't been looking up any of the stuff because I haven't played it. And bear in mind, you've been playing it since release, basically. I'm assuming you haven't been going, Breath of the Wild tricks and tips when you're like 30 hours in. It's just not really something you want to do, is it? In case they drop like the end boss spoiler or some sort of thing you've not seen. So that it probably is going on, and we're just not engaged in it. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom, the follow-up to Breath of the Wild. Cards on the table. Have you played every single Zelda game other than like? You can ignore things like, is it Minish Caps or whatever those little shitters were they released? Like, you must have played the mainline ones, nearly all of them, other than like maybe 1 or 2 at this stage.
I think I've played every mainline one and beat everything from A Link to the Past, so that's Super Nintendo onwards. And then I've probably even like the Game Boy kind of sub ones, so that would be like Link's Awakening. Yeah. Oracle games, Link Between Worlds. I think I've pretty much played all of it. Oh no, the only ones I wouldn't have played are the stylus ones that came out on the DS. Yes. I missed them.
Yes, I think a lot of people miss those.
Yeah, and the very early ones. Like I've played number 1 before, never beat it, and then number 2 was very different and just didn't appeal, so never really played that at all.
Number 2 is really hard as well. It's like one of those old school 2D hard games, along with the ambiguous sort of nature of it. And the first one is kind of like off you go. And I think nowadays people just won't tolerate that level of openness because it's tricky to do. But needless to say, that is a lot of experience with this franchise. Now, the second question to follow up on that is Breath of the Wild. We're now, 6 years away? Was it 2017 it came out?
Yeah.
It was. So it's been long enough where you won't get crucified if you share any sort of negative opinion of it. But generally, what was your thoughts on Breath of the Wild? Because it's a massive departure in many ways for Zelda. And you could argue a lot of their games sort of, upon generations, change a lot. You know, we've seen that with even those first 2, the first Zelda and the second one, markedly different, like amazingly different. And then you got Ocarina of Time, and you know, it feels like they do swap things up a little bit. But Breath of the Wild in particular was like, this is now full blown open, go and do what you want and figure it out on your own sort of jobby. But how did you find this transition to Breath of the Wild?
So I think I have to go back one game prior to that to kind of get the full kind of intel in that. I feel like you're right. They do change up their games a lot, but it's more like graphical style, you know, a core gameplay mechanic. In fact, I'd say really from Ocarina, the game kind of just, it was the same game over and over in terms of structure. You know, you would collect 3 like pendants to open something big, and then something like a game-changing thing would happen where then there'd most of the time be two worlds, whether it's light, dark, up, down, whatever, like that. That was and then there'd be a gimmick within that. Wind turning into a wolf, go to the sky, whatever and I feel like that had been done. And I've always enjoyed them. I love Wind Waker. I love that run of Ocarina, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess. I was like, these are great, all of them. Then they released Skyward Sword, which for me was really a bit of a bum note. Now, it's not a bad game, but it's my least favourite Zelda. It felt basically you had the Sky World, from what I remember, the Sky World there, and then you would jump through the clouds and you would be in a different kind of like mini hub world, so it was completely disjointed. There was no way on the ground to go from the forest to the desert, for instance. You had to go back to the Sky World and back down, and I just didn't get on with it. The story was pretty good, and it went with much more of a proper story, but I came away thinking, Christ, they do need to kind of rejig this formula, and they did. Breath of the Wild was the breath of fresh air, and so I think I really enjoyed it, and I think it was exactly what the series needed. I did have some big problems with it, same as most people. The weapon degradation, terrible. For me, it was the dungeons that were they're the mainstay of any Zelda. They're the things you remember most, basically. And those divine beasts were poor. Like, I could pretty much say, if I'd done my own, I'm not going to, but ranking of top, ordered the dungeons, probably those 4 would be the bottom 4 in whatever order. I just didn't like them. Combat, not great. It basically definitely had some problems, and to be honest, I don't know how much of an open world guy I am anyway. I probably prefer a more curated experience. I like, I don't want to miss out. I don't want someone to go, the side quests are better than the main event. And I'm like, well, fine. And do you know what? And the other thing, really, I guess, the fact that he told his story like retrospectively, like it was all past tense.
Told what story? Huh?
Well, exactly.
Come on.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I've just really negged on it then. I still really enjoyed it, and I think it was absolutely needed. That series was really in need of a bit of a reboot. As much as Nintendo are going to do a reboot for the series, it was needed. And overall, those complaints, though there's quite a few, it was great gameplay. It was fun. I remember coming out onto that the Great Plateau and just being like, Jesus, when you kind of leave the Great Plateau and you realise how big this game is. And I just remember thinking, Christ, like, I was in awe a bit of it.
Yeah.
And obviously that has
through it.
Yeah, and that has tapered off a bit, I guess, over the years, but it was still, I probably gave it a platinum, and is it in my top 3 Zeldas? No.
Top 5?
Potentially not, but they're all apart from that Skyward Sword, I would say that every Zelda is a good Zelda. So very, probably platinum worthy.
Mate,
so
we're not talking about goods, we're talking about greatest of all time. This is the conversation that people are coming here to hear. They don't want to hear anything else. So if you don't come sporting that opinion for Tears of the Kingdom, I don't know what we're going to do. Probably get shut down. Musk's a big fan, I reckon. He'll shut our Twitter account down. do a limit rate on it or whatever he's doing these days. Do you know how long you spent with Tears of the Kingdom, roughly?
I don't know if there's a way. I did check.
There is a way. It's not that accurate on Nintendo because it only checks every 5 hours or so, but it's just more of a ballpark of what you thought you might have sat down and done, because it's taken all of 2 months.
Yeah, I was going to say it must be 70 hours plus. Yeah. I've done quite a lot of it.
Yeah, and it was on the Switch, obviously, because that's all it's available on at the moment. Yep. Not even a Wii U back compat game, unlike Breath of the Wild, which you originally played it on, if I remember correctly. You played it on the Wii U rather than the Switch, the true experience.
Yeah.
Did it have anything to do with? Remember they showed off like the map that you could do with the gamepad? Like
no, I think that was taken away. Basically that, I can't remember what it's called. It's different in Tears of the Kingdom, but like the Sheikah Slate or whatever you had, that was always, it was still designed to look like the gamepad. The gamepad from Wii U. But I think they took away those kind of Wii U. I can't. Maybe they didn't actually. I don't know. No. It's too long ago. No idea.
Fair enough. Any other relevant information we need to know before we kick into Tears of the Kingdom proper?
Well, yeah, played on Switch. I did treat myself to the OLED model of the Switch and got rid of my old one. So I got myself a Zelda-themed OLED to play. In my head, I was going to play the whole thing pretty much on handheld. I didn't, actually. It's probably more 50-50.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the only other thing really worth of note.
And just quickly on that, did it make any tangible difference having the OLED for Tears of the Kingdom, or?
I mean, it is nice as screen. I mean, but other than that, not really. It's bigger.
And this
brighter.
was the Zelda edition, wasn't it? Is the white? Is it the white one? Yeah. It looks. To be fair, that looks nice, but not really my cup OT, if I'm being honest. I'm just going to quickly read off what game has on the store page. I like to do this now, just to set the tone. It says here, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo Switch. Explore the vast land and skies of Hyrule. An epic adventure awaits in the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom game, only on the Nintendo Switch system. In this sequel to the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild game, you'll decide your own path through the sprawling landscapes of Hyrule and the mysterious islands floating in the vast skies above. Can you harness the power of Link's new abilities to fight back against a he struggles with Malevet. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
You do it.
No, because now I can't do it.
Malevet.
Malevet. It's got an extra syllable to it, though, isn't it?
Anyway, a nefarious forces that threaten the kingdom. That's going to annoy me all session now. So that's what they've got on there. Now, the actual game page on Nintendo's got more, but you have to like click through a slideshow and all. I ain't doing all that. But that's the kind of setup that they've given for Breath of the Wild. Let's start on your side of things. In terms of story and narrative, you said you called out Breath of the Wild not really doing the best job there, sort of playing it backwards and having to pick up memories and whatnot, and then what was there perhaps not being of substance. Has that been improved in Tears of the Kingdom, and to what extent, I guess, compared to some other games that you've played that kind of maybe have strong stories? Where does it fall on the scale? Above Breath of the Wild and up there with some of the best, or same as Breath of the Wild and struggling to get off the mark?
So it's better, as in the actual story is more of a story, and the way you find the story is like I don't know how you did, but on Breath of the Wild I maybe came across 2 or 3 of the memories by chance, and then when I got to the end game I pretty much just googled where they were, got them, because I was like, I'm not gonna, that's just too painstaking going around that world looking for the exact angle. So you collect them in a different way. He's done it.
People can hear I'm using Google and it's announcing it in my ear roll. They can all hear it because it feeds through. So it's one more. She'll do it properly, this one. Malevolent. There we go. That's what I was trying to say. It's spelt not like that. Yeah. That's what put me off. Anyway, sorry.
Oh dear. So better story. The way you collect the story is the same, but fundamentally, the way that story's told, again, through essentially a memory system, apart from certain parts, which are probably happening in Breath of the Wild. I've only played that game once, and it's 6 years ago. So you kind of get 4 or 5 of the beats by going through the main quest, and the rest of it is, you have to kind of go out your way to find it. So if, like me, you didn't enjoy that way of being told the story, unfortunately, it's the same deal here.
Is the content of it better?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's kind of...
It's got the bone. And the thing is here, Zelda game has a particularly good story. I would say that in the earlier 3D ones, they were kind of ahead of the game because not many games had anything like a cinematic story, and they did. This has the bones of a pretty good story, but like all Zeldas, it's just not fleshed out.
Yeah.
Anywhere near. And the other thing they miss out on, I think, I just, because the last open world game I played was Elden Ring, and that's kind of seared into my brain. I did a lot of comparison in my head as I was playing this, and I'm like, I feel like they really missed the beat with that kind of level of world building that games like that do. With the item descriptions, with the loading screens. It's Nintendo, that team who've made this game are super talented. They could have, lifted that wholesale off of those types of games and just really kind of added to the world, even if you've got a minimalistic story. Elden Ring for me done a lot with a few cutscenes, and something like Shadow of the Colossus done even more with like 3.
Yes, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so with that kind of brilliant world building, this doesn't have that. So for me, a missed opportunity, really.
So don't get Tears of the Kingdom if you're looking for narrative masterclass. I think that's fair to say. Well, on the technical side, this isn't really your strength, and it's not the Switch's strength either, as everyone knows. It's not a technical powerhouse because it's a fucking handheld, and that's it's being blown up on people's TVs because without that, people like me would have struggled to get it. But in terms of performance, Nintendo games very rarely release in anything other than immaculate state. I saw there was like a duplication glitch and some other like really like small minor things that were there. But in terms of like technical issues, crashes and things like that, I can only assume the code is almost clean as usual, and just Nintendo just don't typically send out games that are in dire straits unless it's Pokemon, in which case they sort of point at the Pokemon group and then they point at Game Freak, and they're all sort of pointing at each other going, well, what have we done here? We've sold 20 million copies in a week, so it doesn't matter. But Zelda's one of their flagships that they do in-house all the time and have complete control over, so I'm assuming this is in good condition.
Yeah, I would say the things you're saying, flawless, and to do it on that hardware, probably some sort of technical miracle.
Yeah.
However, even my old eyes, my God, this runs at about 15 frames at times. Like so much slowdown when there's things going on. Yeah, and from all their wizardry, that Switch is it's creaking at this. I played that Bayonetta, which looked, 10 times worse than this. But that was the first time I looked here and thought, Jesus, like this it's starting to struggle. And it showed even more here, really.
That's interesting to know. I mean, one of the key reasons why I haven't jumped into it is one that I was playing Persona 5 Royal, and I thought I can't pick up another big game at the same time. And Persona 5 Royal was so good that I didn't really want to anyway. But also in the back of my mind, I was like, there's probably going to be a Switch in the next 18 months. So like holiday, Christmas time 2024 would be the latest I would expect it. If that prediction is true, should be a bit more powerful. There should be a Zelda version of Tears of the Kingdom on that system, and naturally it should just run a little bit better if nothing else. And who knows, it might have some other bells and whistles. So it's interesting to hear that perhaps this was not a step too far necessarily, but certainly you can tell we're at the end stage of the generation or the cycle for Nintendo, and even their own in-house games, they're pushing it right to the limits. They're like hitting the ceiling constantly. Any other issues or things to talk about on the presentation? I mean, how does it look? I mean, does it look like much of an improvement from Breath of the Wild? I have seen side-by-side screenshots, and there is improvements there, but I don't know if I would say, I can see why the Wii U couldn't have this running, other than perhaps the scope of the game, but visually, it kind of sticks with that similar style that we had in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. To me, again, because I haven't played it for a while and haven't seen those side-by-sides, it looks exactly the same, almost more like a DLC in terms of absolutely not DLC in terms of content, but just like, it could have been made in 2019 rather than 2023. It's very similar. I mean, like I said, more technical, and it is the scope of things. Like, you can jump from the sky via the land into the depths, all in, no loading. It's things like that are quite incredible, and just the music cues changing as you kind of go from one area to another. It is brilliant. Yeah. But visually, if you like that kind of, I don't know what to say, it's not cell shaded, it's somewhere in between, isn't it? So it's a nice art style.
It's not photorealistic, is it? It is an art style, as you say, rather than and
it works for it. It's good. It's nice.
Again, I think we have to repeat, this is running on a handheld device. And I know we've got the Steam Deck and the Ally ROG now, which are basically mini PCs in handheld, which kind of show what could be done if you put some real money and power into it. But Nintendo didn't do that here. And as we said, the actual system's old. 6 years, knocking on probably 7, nearly 8 years by the time we get a second look at whatever they do next. So that's interesting. I will just gloss over this, but I'll make sure there weren't any other issues you had other than what you've mentioned there in terms of like crashes or things.
No, like I said, it pretty much was flawless in terms of like actual performance, apart from those frames dropping. Lots of slowdown, but in terms of crashes, anything like that, no, absolutely not.
let's get into the game itself. I want to hear about some of the changes they've made, what's good, what's bad. Because some people have gone off and played this game and gone up to orbit, like they have with some Nintendo games. They don't come back, unfortunately. You don't hear any sort of sense out of them for many years. They just come back with this sort of changed persona, and how this is the godfather of everything. Adkins has gone to orbit and not come back at all. For example, he's sort of got stuck in some gaming rut where he's not even finishing the game off. So I don't know whether he's enjoying it still or not. But in the early going, he was really banging the drum for this, and was very much interested in it. But like I said, it's been reviewed so highly. It's no longer the highest rated game on OpenCritic. It's down to number 2, joint second with Red Dead, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. They're all sort of joint. Red Dead 2, that is. And Mario Odyssey, your favourite, is sitting at number 1. So all those news articles of Tears of the Kingdom, the new top, lasted all of a week. And none of them updated the stories, which is interesting. So where are we with Tears of the Kingdom then? Because I've seen there's a lot of creativity available with the new powers in terms of crafting things together. Some people say that the problem around the weapon degradation basically fixed because you can fuse, lots of weapons together. They've got more durability on them, and you can just keep doing that over and over. I've seen criticisms where it feels like you're constantly having to collect resources and other bits to fuse said weapons or said bits and pieces, and that's a bit of a drag. That's not something people want to do in a Zelda game. But again, this is a departure from the OG series and probably an extension of Breath of the Wild. Where do we stand? What we like and what we dislike in? There's a lot to try and pack in here because it's a vast game, but I'll let you just go where that little Pac-Man brain feels like it needs to go.
Okay, so it's probably the closest sequel they've ever done in terms of it. It just, it is Breath of the Wild 2, like no doubt about it. And it builds upon that. It uses that as its template and it goes with it. I would say that everything it does that Breath of the Wild did, it does better. So it is a better game in pretty much every single way.
Yeah.
So powers, they take a while to kind of get your head around. There's definitely a steep learning curve. Like just, for instance, the one that you can ascend through things. Honestly, for the first probably 10 hours, I was, basically trying to climb up everything, getting stuck in rooms, not realising I could just ascend out. The way to get over mountains for me, and we'll get into that. So the way I ended up getting over mountains was I generally looked for a cave and then just ascended from the bottom to the top. Made a lot of sense. But, with these other powers, you've got at least 3 or 4 different options to achieve almost. Basically, I think they've looked at those videos online and realised people love the creativity that kind of probably wasn't meant to be in Breath of the Wild, and they've just lent into it. Yeah. So if that was what you were into in Breath of the Wild, you are absolutely going to love this, because
stay in orbit, not come back.
Because I would sit there and work on puzzles and figure them out, and then afterwards Google how to do it, and there was 3 or 4 other ways to do it that weren't the way I did it, and I'm just like, it's obviously been designed that way, and I couldn't believe it. So those powers for a start are just better than the ones in Breath of the Wild. Gameplay loop, I guess, is similar in that you have an opening world, then you're in the main quest where you can just kind of go anywhere, complete things in any order and whatnot. What I would say is it was late in the pre-game sort of hype, but I started hearing that the temples had been fixed. They were much more in line with the classic
proper
Zelda
dungeons.
Ones.
Yay.
Again, and that's not the game's fault. That's me getting hyped up on that old train. Jumped on, stayed on there to the last stop, and I was disappointed, Joe, because they're much more in line with the Divine Beast than they are of any classic Zelda dungeon.
Do you think some of this is that people don't have lived knowledge of original Zelda games like you have? You almost play them all in real time and had that experience through. There's a lot of perhaps journalists these days that aren't old enough to have even played them. There's a lot of talking heads that won't have played them at the time, may have gone back and dabbled with Ocarina because they heard it was good, but don't have that kind of moment to moment, memories of what a dungeon could be like, and therefore when they see it's an improvement of the Divine Beast at any level, they're like, oh yeah, this is what people were probably talking about, much more like it. Or am I just being
No,
conspiracy
maybe,
theories.
perhaps. Yeah, because I mean, there's big development cycles. If you take Breath of the Wild out, I don't know when Twilight Princess has come out. That's probably like 2012 or something. 2009, 10.
You'll find it. You keep going, I'll find it.
Yeah. So very much potentially. What else was I going to say? I think what it is Nintendo make these games so open that they almost kind of hamstring themselves. I don't know how it works with the development and coding of these games, but the fact that all the temples tend to be of a similar difficulty because you can go to anyone first. They're all similar in design because I guess you only ever need your core powers to kind of get through them. I would just like it better personally if they'd done it where it's open, but GTA open, where, there's your map, but you know what? There's something in your way. You can't go over there yet because you need some, item A or B. I just don't feel like they need to be as open as they make them. Again, I found it was something I didn't like in Breath of the Wild. And again, it's here in Tears of the Kingdom. So on the one hand, amazing that you can do anything, go anywhere and complete the game in 20 minutes if you know what you're doing. But for me, that's not necessarily a positive.
So just going back, so we're Twilight Princess HD in 2016. 2015, we're Triforce Heroes, which doesn't count. Majora's Mask 3D, which doesn't count. A Link Between Worlds, which is the free. I think that's the one you really liked, actually, the 3DS one of that. Wind Waker HD, also in 2013. And then Skyward Sword was originally 2011.
So 2011's last mainline game. So what's that? It's like 13 years. So absolutely, there could be people, and then when you go back further than that, probably to Wind Waker original. Yeah. Exactly. That's, your last... I say it was well. I mean, they were all well received, but to be fair, Wind Waker actually was not panned, but a lot of people had complaints about
Don't like that look of it, do they? It looks like a cartoon.
Sitting out now, everyone goes, "Oh, it hasn't aged today." So, what do you want? What do you want? So that's. I mean, have you got any other questions about this? Because it could go on forever, but I've also lost on what I'm saying.
No, well, I mean, I guess the headline I'm getting is there's a lot that's changed and also a lot that hasn't changed. And it's almost like a status quo of Breath of the Wild. There is a certain style of gameplay that will appeal to, and you used the term well, I think, leaned into that side of things, that creativity, that sort of toy box nature of Breath of the Wild with the highly complex physics system and the way that you can fuse the different powers and use them in tandem just to create insane bits and pieces and contraptions. But those looking for traditional Zelda, for whatever that means to whoever it means it to, perhaps lacking. And that's maybe not a negative thing for many people. I mean, this is the most popular Zelda game ever now, so clearly they're doing something right. But old heads who come up through the ranks, who helped Zelda become what it came by waving the Zelda flag back in the 90s, now being hung out to dry for Roblox Lite, many are saying.
Yeah, I mean, that is basically how I feel. I feel like, as good as this game is, I mean, it is for me, because I still enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm just not on the same wavelength as some of these people, because I'm not fussed about building a go-kart that can go across Hyrule in 20 minutes, like I'll wait whatever I need just to get me over the thing, and then I'm happy. It doesn't keep it very basic, and then I'm done, I'm happy. So I'm never going to sort of go into those bits. The same with, like, on the one hand, it's great because, you can fuse anything, like, especially to the arrows, I found really good, because you get that kind of slow motion bit to give you a bit of a, second to kind of attack. And you can just, but the thing is, I wouldn't really think about anything. I would just randomly assign something to an arrow.
See.
And if it froze them or took a lot of health off, I was like, right, let's go with that again and again and again and again. So,
I like the eye thing. You could like put an eye to it and it tracks them. And because I found the aiming of Breath of the Wild sometimes difficult.
Once I found that one out, I used it a lot, to be fair.
Yeah. And also, in Breath of the Wild, a lot of those items you picked up, like the wings and the eyes, you had about 1 million of them by the end of the game. They were not useful. There's like, make a stew or critic. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to make an elixir. I don't need it. I've got 50 fucking arts now. Of all these little mini shrines that you've given me. So I'm kind of glad in one sense that they've given those items a bit more of a use rather than just chuck them in a bowl and seeing that stupid music going din, din, did. And then he goes, "Oh, you can now resist the cold for 5 minutes." I'm like, oh, good. I'm in the fucking lava land, but that'll be useful perhaps later on.
Yeah.
We still have the shrines, of course, and we have also the sky fucking planets, whatever they're called. I know there's a certain name from people who are pulling their hair out over that. Start on the shrines. Are they still? Because I quite liked the bite-sized nature of those, and that they kind of present you a problem at a very base level, and then by the end of it, you've solved that problem 4 times in depth with more complex issues. Are they still of that ilk? And are they still? I don't know if you liked them originally, but I certainly did, and that's kind of one of the highlights that I found from.
I was going to say that was probably the highlight in Breath of the Wild, and arguably the highlight here for me as well. They're again just as probably more so creative because those core powers are better, like hands down. So yeah, I love them all. Like the way. The feeling you get once you kind of figure it out, and like you said, then it just becomes a harder version of the same puzzle.
Yeah,
and the answers are so obvious sometimes, but my God, you'll be sitting there for ages. I'm not the smartest man, but it gives you such a sense of satisfaction, and probably the most, dungeon wise, that they are, much more in line with those kind of puzzles you would have seen in a traditional Zelda dungeon.
So size.
They're actually easier to find, the dungeons here as well. They're a lot more in the open. They still have a puzzle sometimes to get into them. But do you know what? That is one thing I like about this as well. Probably the same in Breath of the Wild, where like everything you do in this game is its own little puzzle. You'll find like they have the towers again where you unlock the map, and you might get 1 or 2 for free. But every other one, there's something wrong with it. There's a puzzle to be solved just to get it to work.
Just to get up to the top,
Also, I do love that like everything you do just then creates another puzzle, another roadblock that you just got to think your way around.
Yeah. I always used to like just walking up to a random lake in Breath of the Wild and then putting on like the magnet power. And 8 times out of 10, there'd be a little crate in there that you could pull out, a little bit of treasure and whatnot. Now, the treasure became almost useless towards the back end of the game. But that was always something. And like you said, the world's littered with all these small things, and you probably miss 40% of them just wandering by, not realising there's a little puzzle kind of to be had there. So these Skylands, or whatever they're called, and again, people get annoyed by the wrong terminology. How does this add to? Obviously, it adds to the game just in scope because you're going up a whole new level. How much so, and how impressive is this? Or is it a bit of an unneeded distraction in the way they're kind of implemented? Because Hyrule felt big enough to me, and now we're adding an above and a potentially a below sort of versions of that to go and explore. So there's a lot of mass to be wandering around in, to get lost and to get sidetracked.
So neither really. Like, is in the Sky Islands are definitely like core to the story they tell in this. They're needed. You can pretty much avoid them apart from a couple of key, instances. And like Breath of the Wild, like Hyrule, like the Depths, they're kind of just a bit barren for the most part.
Yeah.
You'll land on one, there might be a chest and a couple of enemies to fight, and, that will be it. Some of them are larger, shrines and whatnot.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I was kind of nervous I was thinking, Christ, Breath of the Wild was big. Now I've got to contend with, an entire map underneath Hyrule, an entire map above it. Like, this is going to be ridiculous. But no, it's not as like overwhelming as you kind of are first led to believe. There are, do you know what? Some of the good stuff though, like, in the story, these islands have risen up, so they'll have like rocks falling off them, I guess. You'll run past. And it took me a little while, but I realised I could use one of the powers to rewind time.
That little
hold
recall.
onto a rock, recall. And basically, that is how I kind of navigated Hyrule for a long time. I'd fly myself up to the top and then just kind of fly across. Because, something you said then did ring true as well. This game is fucking hard to begin with. But then there becomes a point where it becomes very easy. Do you know what I mean?
Put the work
and because it's so hard, I feel like what I did was exactly what I said. I would just fly up and basically avoid all encounters. Because you can level up through the shrines. you don't need to engage. The weapons all fall apart after 5 minutes. Doesn't at the end of the day, yes, you can fuse things and make them stronger, but they still fall apart. Like, there's no way around that. So it's a strange game. The balancing is a bit off for me with it, really, in that it doesn't, again, because of those lack of dungeons, because of that lack of slowly building your arsenal of weapons. It's kind of a weird, it's definitely an odd difficulty balance. Strange.
Yeah, because I've revisited Breath of the Wild. God, was it this year or late last year? Anyway, within the last 12 months, and I went through it more in depth than I did the first time. Because I got to a point the first time I went through it, and I was like, I just want this done. And I know what to do. I need to go and see again at that. And it was like, okay, I can just. And there was always that thing. I was like, I'll do that and then go back and clean it up afterwards. And then I did it, and I was like, I'll put it down for a week, and then never went back until recently. And when I first booted it up, I remember dying more than I died in the opening of Elden Ring. I'm not even joking. I was like, maybe I was a bit more careless. It was Elden Ring. I was super on guard all the time because anything could spring out and kill you, so you're a bit more cautious by nature. But initially I was like, these 3 hearts, I'm taking 2 hits and I'm down, and God forbid one of their wooden clubs gets set on fire and they swing that at me, because I'll die in 1 hit. And it took a while, like you said, for the game to sort of balance, where I felt like I could compete, and then later on, once you get more and more hearts and stamina and armor and whatnot, it becomes much easier. But they definitely you start out underpowered compared to what can happen, and you can die pretty quickly. And
the combat's just not that. Again, when I was thinking of Elden Ring, I was like, you die loads in Elden Ring, but that is you get good at that, you're fine, as they say. Technically you can beat anyone there without taking a hit. It's ridiculous, but it can. Zelda, yes, they got the sort of the flurry rush still, the parry system and all of that, but I learned those things when I needed to, come up against an enemy where it was kind of, clear that I needed to do those things. Otherwise, you're kind of just locking on and swinging away and do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I do find the bread and butter combat very standard and not actually that good. It's just there as and I always was under the impression they wanted you to use those powers and whatnot. And I was hoping maybe they would improve here, but the bread and butter sort of swinging and blocking and dodging was kind of felt really. It felt like it hadn't really moved on, perhaps since Ocarina of Time when they first stumbled across that lock on and then the dodging
100%
and whatnot.
What I would say is here they just want they've got even more creative, because I haven't really mentioned it, but you have companions essentially, and you can utilize in any battle situation you can use your core sword, shield, arrows. You can use the abilities to kind of manipulate the terrain to your advantage. And then as you kind of meet these companions, you can use their weapons essentially. So the amount of things you can do in combat is huge, absolutely huge. Although not ideal, because sometimes you will be trying, the companions are there in real time, and you need to kind of go up to them to activate their power. And honestly, the amount of times when I was in the fucking middle of battle and I was looking for the little wind fella and couldn't find him, I was like, where's he gone? And not always ideal.
I found that the one thing it shared with Elden Ring, which I didn't like, was just the clumsiness of moving between weapons and powers. And in Elden Ring, it's more about objects, isn't it? And even healing stuff. You're fiddling around with the face button thinking, oh, bloody hell, what am I doing here? And then you've got to hold the left bumper to select your shield, that breaks, then you've got to hold the left bumper and press the left on the D-pad to change to your fresh shield and all that sort of stuff. It is
mate, there's a few times when I threw away because one of the powers, if you just press the wrong bumper trigger, you'll end up throwing your sword in a river when you wanted to fuse something to it. And I just think it is a victim here where there's just so much you can do. That some of the button configurations kind of get a bit weird. There's just not enough buttons on that Switch to kind of actually do it. And they do a really good job of mapping them as best they can. But again, that is a big learning curve when you start big.
Yeah, absolutely. As we just sort of wind down into this, anything to say on bosses? Obviously a big staple of Zelda. Obviously don't give away the content of them. But how are they? Because I again on Breath of the Wild was like, these are okay. I don't know if I want them any more complex because of the controls and the combat being a bit stiff. However, we'll always take some sort of really exciting and compelling bosses if given the choice.
Yeah, so these are, I would say, probably the biggest improvement for me. Well, for me, yeah, over Breath of the Wild, they are much more in line with what you would expect.
Nice.
In terms of like physically, you know, what you need to beat them, the encounters, just like everything about them was more what I would say epic and more Zelda. So yeah, big improvement there.
Excellent. Let's do the formalities. Unless there's anything else you wanted to mention.
I guess really the only other thing is the depths itself. We didn't really speak because that has got more going.
Yeah.
Because obviously you sky and depths, and then you got Hyrule. I would say there's more going on down there.
Okay.
For sure. And it has that. It does. I love honestly the score in this game is fantastic. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything else. And the little I don't know, string arrangement as you kind of descend into the depths. So good, so nice. And then it's completely dark down there, so you kind of get this one utility resource that will light as you go. So you need to kind of make sure you got your arrows, or you're going to throw these little light seeds. And there's definitely a lot more. There's a lot of high level enemies. There's mainline story down there. I feel like there's a lot more going on in the depths than there is in the sky, and that was a really nice addition. I guess that is probably. I mean, there's a load that you could talk about in this game. We could be here hours, couldn't we? So
it's one of those things, just to draw the line somewhere. Otherwise,
yeah.
There is just too much to talk about. These games are so vast in scope, for better or for worse. Well, look, the Dimp Digital Game Gallery is obviously open 24/7, and we take new games to be inserted into it if someone within the ranks just feels like it deserves to go in. So does The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom earn itself a way into the Dimp Digital Gaming Gallery?
I would say that even before I played it, I would have probably given Terence a call and said, Terence, get the plaque ready. We've got a new game coming. So
Buff it up,
absolutely.
Put it on pre-order. So it's going in there. And I guess the final part, and some people will say it's a minor detail, but this is what people really are interested in, is how do you want to grade it? You've got platinum, gold, silver, and bronze.
I'm going to give Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom a gold.
A gold? So it doesn't get the full plat?
Not from me, no.
That'll annoy people.
They can annoy them all they want. I'm telling you. Don't get me wrong. People, if someone tells me it's their favourite game of all time, with the the level of...
You'll go, how old are you? You didn't play the old ones, did you?
I'm not complaining. No. I'm not going to argue with them. But for me...
You can't argue with them. That's for one reason. You literally can't.
Yeah, no, exactly. But this is not, I just kind of, I don't, because they're not going to go back now, is the thing. I guess my best hope is they remaster some of the old ones, which they've got every chance of doing.
Yeah.
And then, I'm fine with this series. It's, it needed a revamp, but just not everything in it is for me. And I think most of it comes down to the fact that, like I said, I'm not a massive open world guy. I think, again, going back to Elden Ring, I think what helped me there with the open world is because it's so hard and because I'm not very good, you're forced into the world to kind of grind to level up to then fight the bosses that stand in your way. Whereas this, on the pure adventure side, just looking for things that, for the sake of looking, it just doesn't do it for me like the same, because you can just kind of, collect resources, collect, potions and food to get you through. And then once you get to a certain level of weapon, then you're fine. So it just didn't really have that kind of necessity to see the world, to kind of get through the world.
Yeah.
And kind of what they've chose to kind of go with are the bits, again, that aren't really, for me. The bits for Zelda for me will always be, probably more into like the story and the dungeons, and because the story's lacking, because dungeons still, they're in improvement, they're not there.
Yeah.
It's just, if I think of the Zeldas that I love, they are platinums. This is, for me, a level below, which does sound mental because this game is universally loved. And it is still a great game.
Yeah.
Just one off from me.
One off. Well, that's what happens sometimes, and we appreciate your honesty, because you're not allowed to say that really out loud. So for you to put it out there to the sort of millions of Idle Game Chat listeners, they'll be coming for you. But anyway, good to get us in the books. I'm glad that you managed to get your way through it and sunk a good amount of time into it. Didn't rush through it, just played it naturally, and been good to speak to you about Legend of Zelda. There is no better person in the Dimp ranks to speak about Zelda because, like we said, easily got the most experience going back all the way to the 90s and the 80s. Sort of old head, useful knowledge, wisdom they call it, didn't they?
That's it, yeah.
That sort of stuff. Anyway, we're going to get out of here for this week. If you made it this far, thanks very much. We appreciate your time. But nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.